you're doing!
Here we go.
Final Fantasy VII Remake is definitely one of the best games to come out of 2020, with engaging combat mechanics, lovable characters, and an interesting plot all taking place in a reimagined Midgar. Remake is a very enjoyable experience and is definitely worth playing. As a person who hadn't played the original, I found that Final Fantasy VII Remake does an excellent job of bringing players into the setting, story, and most importantly, gameplay. Those who have never played or even seen gameplay of the original Final Fantasy VII in any form will have no problems being introduced into the Final Fantasy VII sub-series through Remake, and will find themselves immersed in the dystopian setting of Midgar and enthralled by the journey our protagonists endure. Though it goes without saying that my review of this game cannot be told from the perspective of someone who has played the original, and I will not be making comparisons to it here. With that said, as an uninitiated gamer who has only heard the legacy of Final Fantasy VII through the internet and has taken an even greater interest since Sephiroth's addition to Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, Remake is an incredible game, earning points for its presentation, graphics, combat, story, and characters. Though there were a few minor issues I had with the game, none of them significantly harmed my overall experience. The gameplay is absolutely jamming. The combat system is fun, fluid, flashy, and is overall one of the strongest points of the game. Normally in other games, I only really go out of my way to kill enemy mobs if I need to level up or farm something, but in Remake, if I get the opportunity to, I actively seek out combat because I just have so much fun in battles. The active time battle, or ATB system, is really well implemented, and switching characters or commanding the other characters mid-combat feels amazing. The game rewards you for being efficient and constantly swapping between characters to build up their ATB gauge, allowing you to use more abilities and spells within the same time frame, as opposed to just staying with one character and occasionally giving out commands to the other. The only complaint I really have is that not all characters were given fair treatment, and by that I mean, while I had a lot of fun playing as Tifa with her flashy and vigorous attacks and utilizing her unbridled strength ability, Barret wasn't all that fun to use, at least in my opinion. Although that's to be expected. When it comes to having streamlined, fun combat, it's usually hard to make the gunner type weapons or characters look flashy or engaging. For instance, it wasn't until Monster Hunter World that the bow guns from the Monster Hunter series become just as fun to use as the melee weapons. Later on in Remake though, Barret does have options to use close combat weapons, but he still didn't click with me as well as Cloud, Tifa, or even Aerith, and Aerith is also a ranged character. Perhaps it's due to Aerith's more fluid animations and her identity as a white mage, and has generally a more intriguing amount of options in her equipment. Or perhaps because Aerith is just the more superior girl and the better one out of all of them. Don't at me. Remake's combat system is definitely the highlight of the game, which makes certain parts of it, like the repetitive side quests, much more bearable, but I'll talk about that later. This game features a proficiency mechanic and allows versatility and freedom over what the player can use. Each weapon has a unique ability, but if proficiency with that weapon is maxed out, then that ability is permanently unlocked for that character without requiring that weapon to be equipped. So once you have that ability unlocked, you're free to swap to other weapons that, let's say, has better upgrade options or stats. Each character can only use one type of weapon. Cloud with swords, Tifa with gloves, Barret with guns, and Aerith with rods. Progressing through the game, you will find more weapons for each character, and each of them can be upgraded to boost its stats, give passive bonuses, or add in materia slots. As the characters level up, they earn SP which can be spent on these upgrades, but each weapon has its own pool of SP, meaning that even the starting weapons can still be viable later in the game if the bonuses from it appeal to your playstyle. One of my favorite things is that Cloud can use a nail bat, which is hilarious to see him swing. As for materia slots, they allow you to place materia orbs into your equipment, and they provide you with other buffs such as increases to HP, MP, unique passives, or allowing the character to use spells familiar to the Final Fantasy series, including summon familiars. Materia is leveled up through combat, and should you wish to change your build around due to discovering a new materia or weapon, you can swap materia between characters and have it retain its experience and level. For instance, you want to make Tifa your designated raise caster and give Cloud the new arrow spell you found. You can take the raised materia off Cloud, which still has experience in it, and give it to Tifa, who doesn't have to level up raise from scratch. All of these mean that the player can be extremely versatile in their builds, and if they wish to change a character's role at any point in the game, they can do so without penalty. Outside of the battles and its combat system and mechanics, it becomes apparent that Final Fantasy VII Remake extended the Midgar part of the original game to a full-length experience. This is both a good thing and a bad thing. Let's start with the good. The developers were very successful in fully realizing the setting and bringing it to the modern era, and holy hijiri, its presentation is truly marvelous. It is mesmerizing to experience the city of Midgard at the beginning of the game, and it truly breathes new life into the setting. Its ability to capture and captivate us with just the setting is truly marvelous. Video games can be seen as a way of escapism, and what better way of escaping the unpleasant realities of our world than to immerse ourselves in a dystopian cyberpunk setting full of cute husbandos and waifus. Midgard looks phenomenal, and just the opening cutscene establishes the setting quite well. There are NPCs that occupy Midgard that are going about their business, which adds to the ambience and really helps sell the setting. It is a bit funny, however, seeing how all these NPCs are wearing regular clothing while the protagonists have anime-style outfits and clearly stick out in the crowd, which does pull me out of the story a little bit, which is made even more noticeable because there are times where they needed to blend into the crowd, and yet the ex-soldier with the blade sword on his back and the large gruff man with a minigun for an arm, or the athletic girl in a biker outfit don't seem to turn any heads.
Play it cool.
And here's the bad part of extending the beginning part of the original. A good portion of the game feels like filler, which makes the expansion of the game feel artificial. The side quests are great for earning money and leveling up and experiencing life in the slums of Midgard, but they ultimately don't contribute much to the story and they feel disconnected from the rest of the gameplay. Part of the problem is that many of the side quests are more or less pretty much the same, going from point A to point B and killing monsters on the way. So there's really little variety in how the side quests are experienced, and they end up feeling a little repetitive. It's a little like how the very first Assassin's Creed game was repetitive, but in Remake it's a lot more bearable because the combat is really fun. Also, the game does feature several mini games that keep it slightly less repetitive than it could have, such as playing darts while waiting for Tifa or exercising mini games while waiting for Aerith. Although certain sections of the game feel very railroaded, it isn't too bad since it doesn't happen too frequently and for extended periods. I think the most noticeable example is when we meet Aerith after defeating the Airbuster. There's a nice sequence of dialogue between the two, which I really like since we get to see more of Aerith's personality and how she and Cloud bounce off each other. And while the whole scene was really lacking gameplay wise, seeing as how it consisted of just navigating through the rooftops starting from the church, it was still really engaging because of the interactions between them. At first I didn't like these parts and they could have been better off as cutscenes, but looking back on it, the decision to do it like this was likely to prevent players from just skipping it so they can actually see these character exchanges. And I'm really glad that developers gave us these moments of character interactions, as they quickly became one of my favorite things about the game. And also, Remake has dialogue during combat, which gives them more personality. This is an excellent way of integrating character development and story progression into gameplay. It's not as implemented as well as a game like Kid Icarus Uprising, but Remake has a completely different tone, so it works really well in this case. While we're talking about the story, again, as a person who has never played the original game, I really like the plot of Remake. Remake's story is somewhat straightforward, at least near the start of it, and it does get clouded with some of the branching plot points and side missions that make the story convoluted and hard to follow at some points. For instance, there's an entire chapter that takes place inside Wall Market. I ended up doing several missions to reach the chapter's main goal, and before I knew it, Cloud was taking part in a dance competition, which was in rhythm game format, before he gets a makeover and is put in a dress. In the end, these plot developments all do tie in together, but while progressing through it, I was questioning what was going on. At the very least, these still felt rewarding, if only just for the end products we received for completing them. And of course, seeing Cloud in a dress is a reward on its own. So overall, the story was quite enjoyable with some stumbles along the way, but the ending itself was really confusing. But I've read that it was mostly for people who have played the original game, which is why I didn't understand it. As for the characters in Remake, their designs and performances are also top-notch. Square Enix did an amazing job at taking the characters' design and balancing them between realism and anime style. Their performances are amazing, the casting choices for the English version of the game were spot on, and never during my playthrough did I ever feel that any of the voice acting was off or miscast. I mean, the cast is absolutely stacked. You've got Badger from Breaking Bad, Soldier 76 from Overwatch, Ryuji Sakamoto and Futaba Sakura from Persona 5, the Cabbage Dude from Avatar. And even more impressive is that there are even lesser known talent in Remake that still did an amazing job, such as Britt Baron as Tifa Lockhart. To add to this, the voice actors and actresses have stated that they didn't have a lot of time to prepare their lines before recording. That, and with the fact that dubbing Japanese is an extra challenge in itself, is a testament to how good of a job the talent did with the voices. And I also quite enjoyed the writing in this game. The characters all bounce off each other really well, and they each have their own distinct personalities. Barrett is a man who lives true to his ideals, and while he may seem like someone who's only characterized by his obsession with Avalanche, he has a lot more to him as a character. He has a daughter that he would die for, and he cares about the residents of the slums of Midgard. Maybe I'm just a sucker for certain character archetypes like the boisterous girl white mage and the shy badass brawler, but I was really invested in these characters' journeys. They're appealing and interesting characters which make the cutscenes more entertaining and really helps alleviate some of the cutscene fatigue. The writer also didn't hesitate to add in some fun to the dialogue, and it really made them more pleasant.
Seriously, Les, she's not half bad. With a little work, I bet she'd clean up real nice.
Cloud, requesting permission to kill.
Denied.
Cloud's character arc was probably my favorite one. He goes from being a stoic, selfish loner who only helps people with expectations of a reward to a guy who would risk his life for the friends he's made along the way. And this change in his character occurs so naturally over the course of the entire game that it actually leaves an impact when he stays behind to help the others escape.
That went pretty well.
Sure did.
Huh? Wait a minute, did you just...
Nope.
Don't worry, we'll be on the same page next time.
What are you talking about?
My only criticism in how the characters are presented would probably be the lip syncing. While the action cutscenes are phenomenal to watch, the lip syncing, at least outside of CGI cutscenes, leaves a lot of room to improve. Now, this isn't really a big deal, however, after getting used to the Life is Strange and Fire Emblem Three Houses lip syncing, it isn't a deal breaker for me since it's really only bad during the side quests in Remake, and it does improve later on. But because of this, many of the throwaway NPC characters just have awful facial animations with some of the lip syncing overly exaggerated and contrasting their lifeless eyes, which kinda gives off an uncanny valley vibe. The main characters at the very least have life in their motion capture performances and facial animations, which is really what matters since they're the characters we're supposed to care the most about. The music for Remake is phenomenal, which is to be expected. It's really hard to go wrong with Final Fantasy music. But the best part about it is the adaptive music that Remake uses. You know how I said that the story could have been better employed when integrated more into the gameplay? Yeah, the music actually does that in the game. The music changes dynamically with the current events in the game, which really pulls you into the action and does a good job at hitting emotional beats. Like, holy crap, the way this ends at the final cutscene after you defeat Sephiroth. The battle music is hype and definitely helped in elevating the already awesome combat experience to greater heights, and during the really emotional scenes where all feels lost, the soundtrack just does a really good job at evoking all the right emotions. Again, I haven't played the original, so I don't have nostalgic attachments to the characters or the story, yet I felt really emotional during the times when our protagonists go through despair and loss, and partly due to the writing, but the music also helped a lot. And as a last note, I would like to comment on the replayability. Remake has a chapter selection feature after finishing the story. Furthermore, hard difficulty is unlocked, which allows you to gather new collectibles called manuscripts. The chapter select feature is also excellent for going back and grabbing missed items or collectibles like music CDs, as well as a convenient way to unlock alternate cutscenes, most notably the 3 different resolution cutscenes that occur during chapter 14. These features help enhance the replayability as opposed to the typical New Game Plus other games feature. In conclusion, Final Fantasy Remake is a solid game and is definitely one of the strongest games to come out in 2020. It is a riveting, compelling work of art that effectively invokes all the right emotions and still manages to be a game with a great amount of fun factor. Anyone who has always had an interest in getting into Final Fantasy VII can find an adequate start with Remake. And as for rating the game, I would give it an 8.5 out of 10.